Welcome to Level Up with Tipi, where we tackle the issues and challenges affecting 911 telecommunicators. Your host, Tipi Brookins, has decades of leadership experience in public safety communications. Here's Tipi.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me on Level Up with Tippy. Today, we are going to talk about a very important topic, and I'm going to do things a little bit different again. This will be a three-part series on wellness and mental health in the ECC for our call takers and dispatchers. And we're going to talk about closing the gap today, building standards for wellness, chaplaincy, and care in 911. And I am joined with an industry expert on wellness and mental health, Ms. Brandi Powell of the 911 Chaplain Initiative. And I am actually going to turn this over to her so that she can provide us an introduction and some of her background, and then we'll get right into the conversation.
Thank you so much, Tippy. It's an honor to be with you today. I My background, is 911. I'm 911 centric. I bleed gold, all of the good things. But I was a 911 dispatcher for almost 15 years. In that time, I was a trainer. I did quality assurance, some system administration. I did a lot of the things that make 911 run, but it was a very, very important part of my life. And as I segued from 911, I started to kind of see the gaps, and that's where the 911 Chaplain Initiative came from.
Wow, that's amazing that you actually took on that as a personal venture. And so you spent 15 years in 911 wearing almost every hat: dispatcher, trainer, QA specialist, and leader. What did you witness during that time regarding the emotional weight of the job? And how did that firsthand experience spark the launch of the 911 Chaplain Initiative?
Firsthand, I want to say that there's that baseline becomes that. Sorry. First of all, I want to say that burnout kind of becomes our baseline. What I noticed is that people would, just be hardened by the job. We have our dark humor, the callous nature of some of the things we say and how we treat each other. I think for me in that space, because I was there so long, it was just normal. There were months and weeks where you were miserable going to work, and there were some times where work was okay. The job itself was typically just crazy stressful, but sometimes fun. But overall, it was kind of a roller coaster. You felt secure in the fact that 911 is needed, but you also didn't feel as secure in your stability, your emotional stability in the position. If you were appreciated, if you were seen, if you were heard, if you were an afterthought or a priority. So that really led me in my journey to starting the 911 Chaplain Initiative, because for me, it was um, after I gotten out, I could kind of look back with clear vision. I could kind of see in retrospect a lot of support that we did not have. In retrospect, I could see a lot of toxic work environment, toxic patterns that we kind of just existed in. And so it kind of led us to the Chaplain Initiative because I realized we didn't have support. We weren't called in for critical incident debriefings. We would hear about it after the fact. And so that's kind of what segued us into if this doesn't exist for us, then why not create this?
And that's amazing because you mentioned burnout becomes the baseline, right? That's something that we're just so used to. If anyone has, worked in 911 as a call taker dispatcher and sat in that seat, that was just something, it was just what we dealt with. And so your personal initiative, because that affected you in the way that it did, and you actually saw that support was missing and you wanted to do something about it. And the other thing that you mentioned was the toxic patterns that we all worked upon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Toxicity was something that was the norm, something that we dealt with and we put up with because we didn't have an outlet to talk about it, right? And so with the 911 Chaplain Initiative, you've been able to help, actually, fix that in a way where you have a place where people can actually, go to and get the support that they need. And so that takes us into the next question when it relates to operational standards versus the wellness gaps.
Yes.
911 has evolved massively, massively. And when it comes to technology, quality assurance, and compliance, why do you think emotional wellness, chaplaincy, and post incident care have lagged so far behind operational standards?
I think it's a lot of reasons. I think we've lagged behind because wellness has become or was always an afterthought. 911 is weirdly one of these industries where you can be burnt out and still function at a high level. It is a very unique thing because some of the symptoms of burnout, the flat affect, the lack of emotion, sometimes that's a strength in 911 and it helps you in your job. So a lot of times I think people can kind of overlook the fact that people aren't well because that's again their baseline. Their baseline is to function at that deficit. And then another thing that to me I think is important to understand is that wellness has been always positioned as a perk of the job, is one of the benefits of the job, like like health and dental. But for people who don't have time for luxury, it sounds luxurious. For people who are caregivers, taking care of yourself usually goes to the back. So when you position something as a perk of the job and not a standard of the job, people think it is optional, right? And then the third thing is there's also this expectation of being hard and being strong in 911. And to be strong in 911 means that you're not affected by things, right? A lot of people are told early on, you're too soft to be a dispatcher. You won't last in this position because you're too soft. So that makes it very shameful to show emotion, shameful to show that you're not doing well or that you're struggling. And finally, there's the fear of repercussion. There are people who are being afraid that if they go get support, they will be declared not fit for duty. There's pride in being strong in 911, so that seeking care looks like weakness. So there's a lot of elements of our job where kind of putting up that strong front are important. Yes, it makes you look like you're an efficient dispatcher, and the nature of the job is for you to be strong and for you to be stoic and for you to be, all of these things. But there's people behind it, and people are hurting, and if you're told and taught that showing it is a liability, then wellness won't be at the forefront. Wellness won't be something you opt into because you don't want to look weak. And I think people tend to part ways with 911 versus getting help. And if they part ways, I always say if you leave 911 without getting support, you're going to go bleed on another industry. So a lot of times I think that's what stopped it from moving forward, because you have to address it and you have to face it. And by facing it, you're acknowledging that it's a problem. And if you acknowledge it's a problem, then you really have to kind of do the work. And historically, they haven't, we don't have the data. Historically, they haven't been keeping track of what of our statistics until the last few, maybe 5 years or so. I'm starting to see more and more numbers for 911, but overall, we're grossly underreported. So I just think there's a lot of stigma associated with admitting that you need support and that you need help. And, that wellness is something that should be standardized as opposed to a perk of the job.
I like how you said that wellness should be standardized, and that is something because like you said, wellness has always been thought of as an afterthought after the fact. That's a perk or that's a benefit. And as you mentioned, some of the signs of burnout, that flat ethic, like there's just no care in the world. We just come to work, we do the job, and it's just very just mum, right? And then the lack of emotion. And so paying attention to that, and the fear of repercussion for appearing weak. I think that has also been a thing in our industry because no one wants to admit that they need the help. I can remember when I went through an incident and, I knew that I needed help, but I went home and I didn't speak to anyone, but I didn't ask for help because I didn't know how. So I can definitely relate there, Brandi, and thank you so much for bringing up those points. And so now we're going to talk about the blueprint and how the 911 Chaplain Initiative bridges the divide. You aren't just pointing out the problem, you're actively building the solution. And I commend you for it. Walk us through how the 911 Chaplain Initiative and your academy are helping agencies establish a sustainable blueprint for care.
Well, thank you for that question. I love the word sustainable. I think that was kind of my word for the year was sustain, was how do we not just get it, but how do we keep it? How do we keep wellness? How do we keep people whole as opposed to I'm gonna give you this, use it, and then it's gone. But um one of the biggest things that we're doing or that we've done so far is we've developed this training that is just intensive of the profession. It talks about spiritual care, but it also talks about the unique trauma that we encounter in 911. One of our biggest initiatives that we've kind of walked into is developing this interfaith peer support model. So it's not just 911 chaplaincy, it's 911 peer support, like it's 911 peer chaplaincy, right? So we're not coming in to replace EAP, clinical care, peer support teams, or even your leadership, but we're building this bridge because there's different ways that people need support. So our chaplains are trained to understand the 911 environment. They're trained to respect different faiths, which sometimes is hard. And if you're called to this, I always say, listen, it doesn't matter what you believe. I'm called to 911. So that's who I serve is 911, regardless of what you believe. But we train our chaplains this very pluralistic way to respect everyone's backgrounds, their belief systems, and offer support in a way that is compassionate, discreet, and appropriate. So that discretion matters. Again, with dispatch, there's this fear of repercussion, fear of all of these things. So with that discretion in mind, we know that dispatchers are often carrying things that they don't want to say in front of a supervisor or in front of a coworker or even their family. So part of our blueprint is creating a safe space, safe access points for care for people who are in crisis. So the academy gives the training for people who already have this heart for the work. It gives them the structure, it gives them the standards, and it gives them 911 specific preparation. So in teaching chaplaincy, emotional wellness, crisis response, boundaries, confidentiality, we teach them how to serve inside of 911 communication center without doing harm. So with that being said, I think the ways that we're doing it, what we're finding is we're learning what's sustainable, right? Because every center is almost like being a mama. Every baby has a different need. Every center has a different need. So we're learning what each center needs in real time so that we can kind of create this model of what works. Do you need virtual support? There are options. We have a partnership with CNTEL to provide virtual support. Do you need in-person care? In Georgia, I'm able to go and I have 8 right now, soon to be 12 chaplains in Georgia who can respond if something happens in the state of Georgia. And the beautiful part is they know they can reach out. So there was an incident happened a few weeks ago and they lost a firefighter and they knew to call us. So like knowing that there's resources out there is the cadence of care that we want to create, is knowing that there are people who are trauma informed to support 911 dispatchers specifically. So the agencies can have this ongoing care, post incident follow up, leadership support, training, and just consistent wellness presence instead of just waiting for EAP. It might be a 3-month wait, or they may not understand 911, or they may understand 911, but you're concerned they're going to report back. There's a level of discretion that chaplaincy inherently has. Chaplaincy in the military is the only form of like mental health support that is completely discreet. They don't report back, and we operate the same way where this, unless someone's life or someone else's life is in danger, it's completely discreet, it's completely confidential. And what makes it amazing is we do try to also be proactive versus reactive, right? So we want to make sure they know that this is a culture of care and that we're here for you and we support you. Many of our chaplains are starting Bible studies. Many of our chaplains are starting different programs in-house so that people know, hey, there's someone here who's trained to support you. So those are things we're doing to create this kind of sustainable model. And looking ahead, I believe that dispatchers will, I mean, that chaplains will be a part of TERT teams. I believe chaplains will be a part of deployment after critical incidents. In other elements of public safety. When they have a critical incident debriefing or de-escalation, there's peer support in clinicians and chaplains, and 911 deserves the same process. But that has to, again, things have to be set in place for it to be a standard of care. So we're creating this blueprint so they understand, well, this is what it looks like for chaplaincy. It looks like someone who's coming by and not just walking through, but who understands the nature of the job, who understands the weight, who understands the very whiplash that our trauma kind of can give us, because sometimes you don't feel it immediately. Sometimes it's a few days later or a few calls later. So it's not just train a chaplain and send them out, but it's training, it's standards, it's partnerships, it's discretion and delivery and long-term care. So they are proactive versus reactive.
Wow, that was so loaded. You mentioned so many things that I'm definitely going to touch on. And so as it relates to the trauma in 911, going back kind of like to the last answer that you gave, there are so many people in 911 that have experienced trauma, but we want to ensure that they know that there are resources out there where they can feel safe sharing. And I think that that has been a thing over the years in 911 is that there hasn't been a safe space. But with resources such as the 911 Chaplain Initiative, you all are providing a safe space that is compassionate and discreet, something that we never had before, where you could pick up the phone or get on a virtual or meet with someone that's not in your agency, because we all know how that goes. You don't want to speak to anyone in the agency or anyone in that network that has something to do with the agency because they don't feel that they can trust. And so I just, using this vlog in this series, I want our dispatchers and call takers and telecommunicators to know that there are resources and there are people that you can talk to that understand what you're going through. And so, again, with the Chaplain Initiative, you mentioned that one thing: consistent support, and also support for our supervisors, because we know the weight that they actually, carry, ensuring that our call takers and dispatchers are supported, but we got to make sure that we start at the top as well. And so thank you so much for mentioning that, because we can't forget about our supervisors as well. And so as we talk about shifting culture and scaling via the CommsCoach platform, the industry conversation is finally shifting from how do we keep seats filled to how do we keep our people healthy enough to stay. And as you look to the future, how is incorporating the CommsCoach training platform going to help scale this emotional and cultural evolution?
I think that's a great question. And I thought about it very carefully. I'm thinking about this very carefully. And I think for me that it gives people practice before the pressure is real. And for me, as a trainer, I used to, and it's so crazy. I used to hope and pray, and it sounds really crazy, but I would hope and pray while I was training somebody. Lord, let us get a robbery today. Lord, let us get a burglary in progress. And I know that sounds crazy. And if you weren't a trainer, you may not get it, but you just hate for those calls to come in after they've been released and they're looking at you across the room and they're struggling. And now they have this moral injury and this guilt of what did I do wrong or what could I have done more. And I think that this gives this practice before the pressure is just kind of this thing that sticks with me. So in now we expect dispatchers to like regulate themselves in the midst of chaos, and a lot of training is still heavily focused on policy and procedure accuracy, and those things matter, but it's not the whole job. There's a lot of emotional things that go into it, and I think having to learn how to manage your tone and your pacing and your confidence, your fear and your frustration, your grief, and all the decision making while somebody is screaming on the other side, or someone's grieving or threatening self-harm or refusing to cooperate. I think being able to practice these things in real time, being able to get there, helps you get this almost what's the word I want to say? Muscle memory of handling difficult things, as opposed to everyone being a shot to the heart. So when we can use realistic simulations and training scenarios, we're not just teaching people what to do, we're building this emotional muscle memory before they're in the real moment. And so confidence lowers your panic. I know when I feel confident, my anxiety decreases, when your panic is lower, there's less emotional residue after the call. And I think that's why we do value people who are so stoic and calm in it, because it's seemingly as if they are more equipped. But if you are more equipped, you can handle it better. I've released people from training, and because they were equipped, those calls came in and they were like, oh, butter, easy, easy. So I think that CommsCoach is going to be really helpful with just preparation, and creating this level of confidence that's going to mitigate some of the emotional turmoil of what I didn't know. And then the second piece is coaching. So a lot of times QA in 911 feels punitive. It feels like discipline. It feels like y'all trying to catch me doing something wrong. And that creates shame. And as a person who used to be chronically just overcome with shame, it is a horrible place to be. It makes you afraid to answer the phone. It makes you scared that everything you're doing is wrong. And a hesitant dispatcher is not as an effective dispatcher. So using this platform, we can identify, patterns. I think you can be able to get better at your job. So it's not punitive, it's preparation. Again, everything's preparation. So it's not punitive. This is to make you better. And I always used to tell people discipline, people think discipline is punitive. No, discipline is to get better. So if I have to get at my child for something, it's because I want them to be better, not because I want to punish you and I want to hurt you, but no, I want you to be better. And I think what CommsCoach does is it gives the trainees this level of hope. And this is my stretch. This is my Brandi stretch. Stay with me. Where it's like some trainers train to see you fail. They train in document, and it's like you're documenting to see if they won't make it, they won't make it. And I'm going to document everything they did wrong. I'm going to document they're not responding to training. But I think when you have systems like this, it really helps you expect the best, and it helps the trainee realize like, hey, you are really putting something in my training, and you're really optimistic about me actually achieving and accomplishing this training. And I just think that matters culturally. People are going to be willing to grow because they don't feel attacked. They're going to be willing to grow because they feel an investment is being made in their training, as opposed to that sink or swim that we did 20 years ago when I jumped into 911. So I think it really helps. I think we can catch patterns, we can prevent burnout and a lot of that insecurity of call taking that new dispatchers get. So I just think it's a really good structure that will affect positively our culture in 911. I think a lot of things start with training. Our new dispatchers come in, and their trainer is their window to the center, culturally, emotionally, um, protocol wise, SOP wise. They're the window. They're the ones who give them what everything is. So if the trainers have what they need to give them the tools to succeed, then I think that we create a culture where new dispatchers can thrive, as opposed to being eaten as we've done so
Eaten
much
alive.
before.
That is so awesome, eating alive, because I definitely can resonate with what you're saying, because I was there. I was the CTO that had to document a person that I knew they weren't going to make it, but that's what I had to do. But I like what you said. Practice before the pressure, and confidence lowers emotional turmoil. They are so important. And thank you so much for just really recognizing, the resource in CommsCoach. Like you said, now we have data and tools in order to understand how the burnout is happening, the types of calls that are being handled, how many calls are being handled, when were they handled, you know what I mean? And so being able to look at that information, we can somewhat be proactive in ensuring that our call takers, dispatchers, telecommunicators can get the proactive help that they need instead of waiting after the fact.
That's
And
correct.
so, where I'm going to ask you this one last question. Where can agencies go to learn more about the 911 Chaplain Initiative?
Okay, so to learn more about us, we have our website, which is goldlinechaplains.org. We're also on LinkedIn. Uh, I want to say we're on TikTok. Uh, and we're also on Facebook. So we tend to be fairly active on all of the social media platforms. But our website is going to be the main resource of information. And if you submit any kind of information request, we get back to you. It comes straight to my phone. I promise we'll get right back with you and just let you know what it is we offer and how we can support you. At the heart of it all, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are a ministry for 911. And our heart is to make sure that 911 is okay, that you are able to thrive in that seat, that you are able to be a sense of support for each other and those people who are called to this unique niche of a calling. We want to be there to support them as they support the goal line. So our website, goallinechaplains.org, is where you'll find the most accurate information.
Thank you so much for sharing that information. And this conversation was definitely needed. And just ensuring that our viewers, they know that the support is there, right? And we know that sometimes things can be difficult, whether it's at work or whether it's home. But there are resources in the 911 field, and the 911 Chaplain Initiative. You're here to help, and you mentioned a lot of great resources. And so, as we wrap up here at GovWorx with CommsCoach, we are training smarter and building better. Let's take your agency to the next level. I'm Tippy, and we're just getting started. Thank you for being with us today.